Hello, and welcome to the symplr Education Series webcast. Today's MSP Task Force webinar is Detoxing Your Workplace Team with guest speakers Donna Goestenkors and Tami West. This webinar has been approved for NAM CEU credits, and you will be receiving them within 3 business days of the conclusion of this webcast. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the question box to have them answered in the live Q&A following this session. I'm sure many of you know her, and I'd love to turn it over to our guest speaker, Donna Goestenkors, now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Callie. Hello to everyone, all of our many listeners. I'm so happy that you've been able to join us today. I'm especially excited that you are participating in this month's educational program for 2 primary reasons. The first one is my colleague and I want to really reinforce the importance of MSP health and wellness, because from time to time we all need to be reminded about the value that we offer in our work setting. And honestly, without you at your best, the quality of healthcare is being compromised. And the second reason is you get to experience firsthand the fun in learning that my co-presenter, Tami West, and I have when we're together speaking on issues important to MSPs. Tami, I would like to state publicly that I'm so happy that your schedule allowed for today's participation. And I just know that our listeners are going to enjoy this educational collaboration. So now, with your special touch and your grace, please say hi to our many listeners.
Hi, many listeners. I am every bit as excited as Donna. I love the MSP world. I love Donna. She has such a heart for you all, and we love one another, and I hope you can hear that. And I know you're going to enjoy what we have to present, especially because it's coming from Donna. So welcome, lovely, thrilled that you're here.
Now, this series is a collaboration indeed, and the most important takeaway that I show on every program that I deliver is the slide and the graphic that's in the center, because every topic that we address comes from you, the voice of the MSP, and that's exactly why we developed this series of programs. Now, this particular slide, when I say a series of programs, this is a snapshot of the types of MSP-centered programs that we have delivered to you and the industry over the past year, with even more to come. Your health, your happiness, contentment, and success is truly something that my collaborators and I care about. So let's jump right in, right? Through our research, what you see on your screen are just some of the inappropriate behaviors that might be exhibited in the workplace where you work. So take just a moment to review some of these examples. Do any of them sound familiar? Do they create a memory trigger? How about the time waster, or the victim, or the meanie in the office? Some of these, and sadly to say, maybe many of these are things that each of us would be experiencing. And each of these have an impact on our performance and our self-worth and really our well-being from day to day. So based upon conversations that I've had and interviews that I've had with MSP colleagues, one or more of those behaviors that we saw listed on the previous slide, they do have a negative impact on our overall health, our productivity, and our satisfaction as a successful and high-functioning and performing MSP. These examples that you see on the screen are things that I hear personally from our colleagues. They feel stressed. Oh gosh, Donna, my blood pressure, I'm having to take blood pressure medicine now. I'm having ulcers or digestive problems. I just don't feel like I want to get up and go to work anymore. I feel like the grind of going into work really tears away at my self-confidence and the way I feel about myself. I know I'm capable of more, Donna. I just feel like no matter what I do, it's not going to make any difference. So it's these things that really has prompted Tami and I to develop a program to help us better understand and navigate through these kinds of stressors that we work with on a daily basis. Tami, could you offer some insight into these real life experiences?
I do, because I mean, I'm an outsider as far as I haven't been an MSP. And when I worked in healthcare, it was actually, I left in the 90s. So we weren't even using computers. But I've spoken, I'm going to say probably at 20 state MSP conferences. And so I kind of watch, right? I go to the sessions and I look. And I just wanted to throw in a couple of things that I've noticed as an outsider when you look at signs that you might be having some real difficulties in the workplace. And just two quick ones. One is sometimes I see a heightened negative reaction to change. So if someone is sitting there as part of the audience and they are working in a very difficult, toxic work environment, when they're asked to then start implementing more change, I feel their pain. Do you know what I mean? I can see it in their face. I can hear it in their voice that they're just having an even more heightened reaction than they normally would. And the second word I wanted to throw in there that I see sometimes is people being kind of distraught because they don't feel connected in their workplace. There may be someone who's giving them such deep problems that they don't know what to do, and they will come up and talk to me at the end. And I'm just going to use the word, they seem distraught. So one thing I want to encourage you to do as we go forward is, in your mind, as you look at some of these things, health issues, motivation, being distraught, all that, try to think in your mind, is this because of one particular situation or person, or am I working in an overall toxic environment? Does that make sense?
Sure does.
Just
Sure
as
does,
you're
Tami.
thinking. So yeah, Donna, I look at them sometimes as an outsider, and I just watch people and I feel their pain. I just feel your pain so much.
And that's the wonderful blend, Tami, that we've always brought to our listeners and audience, is that I can, and that's exactly what we've done in this program. I present real facts based upon my experience as being an MSP and interacting with my MSP colleagues. You as a psychologist bring the science behind it to try to help us better understand and be in control. And that's exactly what Tami and I are going to do throughout this program. We're going to help you identify what I know to be some of the top toxic behaviors that MSPs have expressed to me and that they experience in their job. We're going to help describe for you some strategies on how you can best manage these negative behaviors, and then how you can believe that you have the power to change your reaction to bad behaviors, or to accept or let go, because there are different coping mechanisms that one can use. So as again I do with all of our programs, I like to plant the seed. As Tami said, we really want to help you evaluate, is this one incident, one situation, one individual who possesses these behaviors? But we as professionals, we want to be the professional, the influencer of positivity, and the role model about the change we really want to see. So let's look at the very first negative response or feedback that I got from our colleagues regarding their work experience relating to toxic behaviors. And that's negative clicks and gossip. And what I hear from our colleagues is they feel segregated in some way. That experience is hurtful to them. They feel left out, like maybe they're not good enough to belong to this particular group of people talking. They begin to start feeling paranoid, and they recognize, I mean, colleagues have said, I recognize probably I'm giving some of this too much energy, because it could just be a simple that they want to chat, but the manner in which they're calling themselves together feels very exclusionary. And an example I can give you, again, that comes from our field, and something that should be a joyous occasion, right? A birthday, an anniversary, a wedding shower, a baby shower. There's inconsistency on how events that should bring pleasure are treated or conducted in an office. So there is that sense of cliques and that things are being said about you that may or may not be true. But gosh, why do they have to do that is the question, and it kind of goes along with the whole concept of gossip. So Tami, can you help us with that?
I do. I want to talk because when we talk about clicks and gossip, I'm also going to throw backstabbing in there in a second. But I'm a word person. My psychology field is discursive psychology, which means how we use words. So I just always want to make sure we're kind of looking at the situation, assigning it the correct term. So sometimes there are issues of gossip. And gossip means we're having these casual conversations, these unrestrained conversations, or reporting to somebody about other people. And typically the details have not been confirmed. So it's just that we're just talking casually, as opposed to, when you go to your boss or someone and you are bringing information about someone in the workplace that needs to be talked about. That's not gossip. Gossip is casual, unconstrained. And then let's talk about backstabbing for a minute, Donna. And then I want to talk about why they're so tough. Backstabbing, on the other hand, it's not that you're just reporting or talking. You are actually criticizing someone in a bad way, maybe a malicious way, a treacherous way, while you're pretending to be their friend. And we've probably all experienced both of these, or at least one of these, and they feel bad. And the reason they're so tough, one thing is they feel bad on all levels. It's not just that you are having maybe your work critiqued. It feels bad professionally. It feels bad personally. It just feels bad on all levels. Now, let me look the next two. This is really I feel like my job is to open eyes and look at things differently. We all do it, and we are social beings, and we bond over this. There's an episode of Big Bang Theory, and if you don't like Big Bang Theory, I don't think we can be friends. But Bernadette, there's three women in Big Bang Theory. There's Amy Farrah Fowler, Penny, and Bernadette. They're all friends. Well, Bernadette and Penny are having a little kerfuffle. And so Amy, who's a scientist, knows the science of, oh, they're upset with one another, and I can use that. So then, it's funny, it's all humor, but she goes back and forth between the two and bonds with them separately over this gossip and backstabbing thing. We all do it, but it's important to recognize that we do it. But that's why it's so tough. It plays on any insecurities that we have. Do I feel like I'm not smart enough, that I'm not competent enough, that I don't look a certain way? It all feeds into that. The problem is there's a fine line between pointing it out to a person and seeming like you're whiny because someone's leaving you out. Do you know what I'm saying? You have to really figure out, and I'm going to try to give you some words later or some ideas, because if you don't address it, it can really hold you back. If someone is saying things about you and you aren't then figuring out a way to correct that truth, it will hold you back. So Donna, those are a couple that those can hold us back. We need to work on those. So I'm glad you asked me about those.
So then when we're talking about, again, this comes from the field, gosh, I have a boss who really they're just so inflexible. Everything has to be done exactly how they say. I can offer points of automation. I can offer some suggestions about streamlining. And because they've always done it that way, maybe they were part of the design, they're not even willing to consider another facet. So it has to be done their way. Their sense is that their behaviors are that their listening skills are inadequate. The employee or the MSP might feel like they're stifled or their ideas are always shut down. Then they lose confidence. They take kind of like a more passive role. And this is a quote actually from a colleague. It's almost like when I'm at work and when I'm around this particular manager or boss, I become like a robot. I just know what they want, and I don't feel fulfilled in my role as a professional. So Tami, I don't know from your perspective, can you offer some insight into that, or shall I just go through our 6 points?
Yeah, I think that I'll probably address sort of a general overview on all of these when we kind of get to, okay, what do we do? Is that all right with you?
That's
Okay,
awesome. Okay, then the third component, again, hearing feedback from our colleagues, is the triangulator. That's an individual, usually it's a boss or someone of higher power who manipulates employees. So they try to play one against the other. They tell one person in the presence of the other that they've done a good job, even though the other person was part of that project building as well. So it works on the insecurities and psyches of another. The boss might call in an employee to talk about the other employee. So that type of situation, and again, it's a behavior, but it does not propel, or it does not build trust in a relationship. So knowing that that might be something that you're having to work with, we're going to, again, talk about strategies on how we can combat that and feel more powerful when we have these moments of insecurity. Lack of accountability. I'd say that this is probably one of the things that I hear the most frequently, outside of a bad boss, most frequently among my colleagues in the field. The rules that apply to person A don't apply to persons B and C. Person D has a whole nother set of rules. So there's different rules for different employees. And an example that I can give to you, and this is a real life example, MSP example, administration set out a policy that cell phones and email processing will not be allowed in medical staff meetings. This particular administrator calls other individuals out when they see them pick up their phone or their iPad, right? However, this administrator sits in medical staff meetings and does the very thing that he's holding other individuals accountable for. So it really lacks credibility and trust for that administrator, and respect. The respect is definitely lost. The fifth area, oh, yes, Tami?
I just wondered, when you said who is accountable, do we put in there also sort of the no one taking responsibility for, is that kind of lumped in there? Is that similar? Like, I
bet
see
it
a lot.
is.
Okay, because I hear that a lot, was again, is the observation. When you start talking about accountability, it always seems to transition into nobody takes responsibility for their own actions. So I just wondered
Yes.
if you. Okay.
Yes, I see that as well, and it kind of goes into our point 6. I believe it kind of goes into our point 6. When we're talking about point 5, again, this is field tested sabotaging. And if you remember, I think it was Who's the Boss, or one of those TV shows from the 80s. You're in big trouble, mister. That one show that
and that Full House.
Full House, that was it, yes.
Yeah.
But that's exactly how our colleagues say to us. It's almost like people are talking behind our back telling our work partners something that they're only telling them half truth or half reality, or they're going to the boss and telling them something that you shared with them personally. So it's really about making sure, right, that the individuals that you're working with, you're really providing them accurate information. You're not tattling about situations that really aren't any of our business, and that this actually has happened to me a number of times, because I tend to be a very creative person. So in previous positions, when I was a full-time working medical staff services professional in a large hospital, I would share ideas to our administrators or the medical directors. And the next thing I know, these ideas are being proposed, and I never had gotten recognition. And it's not that I needed that, but always be aware that if you're working with an administrator or someone who is stealing your ideas, there is some accountability or ownership that we own in how to address that. And then our last piece really, and this is kind of that accountability piece that you mentioned, Tami, it's really poor communication. And we know that does exist, right, in our workplace. There's either insufficient communication going back and forth, insufficient communication even about expectations and what's going to happen if that expectation isn't being met. Who's going to be responsible to address when that expectation isn't met? Having indirect, meaning rather than talking directly to an individual to discuss an issue, a point of misunderstanding, we indirectly go to somebody else, somebody who will relay that information to the person who we really need to be talking to about. Withholding information, and again, when I'm talking about the example of about the domineering boss or the bad boss, that's one of the factors. They feel that they're not being told everything that administration is passing along to that manager or director. That affects their job. If they're responsible for a job, gosh, they want to be as aware of what is happening in that organization as possible so they can be a positive contributor to the success of a project. And then misleading communication, again, telling half or partial, sharing partial information about projects. So with those 6 toxic workplace behaviors that I have personally experienced a couple of them, and these 6 factors are, again, come from my colleagues. Tami, can you help us understand how we can tackle these things?
I can. And so the first thing I want to address is I really believe that when we don't address difficult behaviors, there's the first thing that we have to look at is ourselves and if there's a risk. So looking at these 6 behaviors that Donna brought up that are common, let's go through. I want to talk about some risks that might hold you back from speaking up, because there are risks. I mean, speaking, if it was easy, we would not have sessions about it. And I want you to really think them through, because after the risks that I talk about, we want to take a poll as to whether or not you feel like there are risks that are holding you back from speaking up. So let's go through some of the risks, Donna. The first reason that we sometimes won't speak up is because the risk is we think we might not be liked. And don't discount that, by the way, just immediately. Don't just think, well, I don't care. Really do think about it, because most of us want to be liked, right? I mean, most people at least care a little bit. This is my baby, my golden retriever puppy, Charlie. And again, if you don't like golden retrievers, I don't know if we can be friends either, but we'll see. So when I walk him, he's now a little over a year. He's my pride and joy, has his own little Instagram account. And when someone doesn't seem to like him, like, how could you not like him? Everyone likes puppies. Everyone likes golden retrievers. But that's not true. And no matter how wonderful you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how adorable you are, no matter how creative you are, not everyone is going to like you. And I think it's pretty freeing to not require that everyone likes you, because if that's a requirement, you will not speak up. So that's one risk. Really think about it. Do you care about being liked? The second risk, you can tell I do love my golden Charlie. You might be, the risk is I'll be labeled as a troublemaker. Well, the reality is, if you do speak up, and if you speak up on a regular basis, then you might gain a reputation, but it might be, I don't know, this is the mischievous side of my little baby. I don't know what the reputation will be. It could be that you're strong. It could be that you're confident. It could be that you're a troublemaker. I don't know, but usually not unless you are speaking up in a very negative way. Do you know what? You might inspire other people if you do speak up about difficult issues at work. So that's the second risk. Okay, first, maybe you won't be liked. Second, maybe you'll be labeled as a troublemaker. The next one is a really big one. It'll actually increase the problem. So we think, and I hear this all the time, someone will say, well, I'm not going to say anything because if I do, it'll just make it worse. Y'all have probably heard that before. It'll just make it worse. The reality is it depends on what you mean by worse. Typically what happens is the issue might become different. And so let's say that maybe one of the issues was that someone was being gossipy or backstabbing, and you decided to talk with them. And then maybe you come to me later and you say, well, I told you it was going to make it worse. Now they don't speak to me at all. Well, it didn't make the problem worse because the problem was gossip. It's just different now. So we have to decide what our definition is of worse, and we have to also think about whether a different problem is going to be better for us or if we don't want to do that at all. So that might be a risk that you think it'll just make the problem worse. And we've got several more to go. All right, the next one, and look, I don't want to be flippant about this, but some environments is the risk is you could lose your job. And I want you to always think about that. You know, speaking up, it depends on what you're speaking up about, how you're speaking about it. You have to ask yourself some tough questions before you decide to proceed forward if the risk really is that you'll lose your job. So this is a serious one. The next one, and I hope you can see how all these are related.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
before you advance, Tami, on this particular one, what I hear from healthcare administrators is not necessarily that an individual, and I'm not talking just about MSPs, but in general, administrators have said it's not that they spoke up or that they brought to my attention an issue. It was how they approached the subject. Yeah.
It's important. You got to have some skills. We're not born knowing how to do that, right? And some of us are have more innate skill than others, some not. This is another big one. Again, they all relate. It's kind of hard to separate them out. The risk is if I speak up, the relationship will end or someone will be hurt. And again, I don't mean to be blunt or just flip about it, but the reality is it might, they might, you might. The relationship could end. They might be hurt. You might be hurt. It's a risk. Sometimes it's worth taking and sometimes it's not. The next risk, sometimes we feel like if we speak up, it won't be a conversation. It might turn into an argument. It might. Boy, I'm not being very hopeful here, but it might, as long as we recognize that it might. And I hope by the end of today, we'll give you a couple of skills. I mean, it takes longer than a short webinar to build those skills to try to not escalate into an argument, but it's definitely a possibility. And the last slide, this one is something I don't know if you've thought about before, and these are the hidden risks. Your power will be gone. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. When you have a difficult person or they're having difficult behaviors, you have a little bit of moral power there. And I hope that makes sense, meaning that maybe you have the moral high ground. You're in a position of being a little bit better because you don't do that behavior. That's a risk. If you let that go, that what if they change the behavior? You lose a little bit of power. Donna, does that make sense? Like if I'm dealing with a gossipy person and they change that behavior, I no longer have like this moral high ground over this person. It's a weird thing, but it's there. Also, you might be in the wrong. There's probably something that you're doing that might be contributing. You might be responsible for a part of that behavior, and that's hard to admit. And then the last thing is, we oftentimes will talk about people and say, well, they'll never change. Well, what if they do? That means you have a new relationship with that person. It can be risky because now it's different. It's not the same as it was before. So these are some deep things. I hope on a quick minute on that made sense, and we'll stay in touch hopefully if not. But now I want to know what you all think. Let's put the survey up if we could, Callie. And what we mean by this, speaking up at work is definitely risky business. Don't take it just to mean something bad will happen to you or you'll lose your job, although that's one of them. But by risky business, I mean, do you feel like any of these apply to you, that you might not be liked or you might be labeled or it will make the problem worse or you'll lose your job or the relationship will end or someone will be hurt, it will be an argument, or those hidden risks? So hopefully you're just saying, yeah, I agree. There is some risk there. I just want to know if you guys feel that way. We got it going there?
Yes, it is currently running, and we are at 58%, 59% voted. So whenever you would like to close it, we can. And I can.
Okay. Well, and if anybody, I hope that you will write in questions or, chats about, because I think what I said was something you probably haven't heard before about this risk of losing the betterness of ourselves as a person when someone else changes their behavior and then our relationship changes. It's just a new dynamic. So I think we can probably close it. Donna, do you agree?
I agree.
All right, ma'am, let's see what we got.
All right, so 75% agree and 25% disagree.
Okay, you know what would be interesting? I don't know how you guys do follow-ups on these, but just to find out at some point what some of the agrees thoughts are and what some of the disagrees thoughts are, but that's probably out of our scope for today. So we got to address the risks.
Hey,
Yes,
hey,
ma'am.
Tami, before you move on, you know, I always, during my webinars, I do reveal things about myself because I try to make the situations of MSPs very real. And I would like to kind of tattle on myself when I was looking, when we were preparing this program and I was looking at these risks early on in my career, the thing that really was a barrier for me was I won't be liked. Because I agree with you, I think everybody wants to be liked, even if this person who possesses these bad behaviors doesn't like you, and you can say, well, I don't care, I don't like them either. But part of me really did like the people, right? And so I felt like I was failing. There was a part of my professionalism that was failing when I felt like they didn't understand me, or why were they being so difficult with me? So I'm just kind of revealing, again, a vulnerability. As I've evolved, as I've matured, that isn't as important to me. And I think it has to do with my greater sense of self.
Yes.
And working in an environment that is more, they more champion your development, and they more support decisions and risks that one takes. I think that helps. But that's another reason why these webinars have been so important to my team and I, because many people don't have the luxury of working in a real collaborative, healthy environment. So we want to sort of be that little island in the storm, because I know how hard, and I know you know how hard MSPs work. So if this webinar provides that little break for them on saying, yes, I am a good person.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that just for the sake of being honest.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I mean, I think we do, even when you mature, you still, most of us have a little bit of a desire to be liked. And let me add too, that being liked can be very beneficial to you as MSPs. If people don't like you, they tend to not cooperate with you. So I get, it's a risk. It's definitely a risk. So, we did our poll already. That's right. Okay. So now, Donna, you're going to talk a little bit about being healthier and happier, correct?
Yes. So strategies to really be healthy and happier, and this again is based upon research that has been conducted about working in toxic environments. As Tami alluded to, we don't want to ignore the problem. You have to weigh the risks in confronting the problem and the change that may occur. But for you to feel empowered, you have to decide on an approach to address the problem. And only you know your culture the best. Only you know your cohorts the best. So you have to determine, again, the cost-benefit analysis for yourself. Depersonalize the conversation. This has always helped with me too. When something kind of touches my heart, when someone is providing something more on the constructive side, I always analyze, okay, is there merit in what they're saying, or what is their agenda? And that has helped me work at it more like, okay, this is a problem, and every problem has a solution. So by depersonalizing it, it makes it more solvable, at least again, from my perspective. Don't make assumptions. And as Tami said, earlier on when we were talking about the top 6 toxic behaviors, sometimes we make assumptions based upon our observations without all of the information. So if we have a question, ask the question as opposed to drawing our own conclusions, and then making improvements or suggestions to improve a situation, so we're not relying on another individual who may lack self-awareness about what exactly is going on, offer alternatives perhaps on how communication or a situation might be improved. And then following through, if you say, even to yourself, you make a commitment to yourself that the next time you have a conversation with this particular individual, or the next time this situation comes up, this is going to be my script. This is going to be my empowerment statement on how I respond. And then just practicing it, making certain that you do that. And really, this is true. Sometimes if we have the ability to distance ourselves from that aggravant or that behavior that is so distressing us, do it. And sometimes, and again, I know this is factual, there are some colleagues who have actually asked to be relocated from a seating perspective so they don't have to surround themselves for 8 hours a day with this person that has this disruptive behavior. When we talk about those strategies, it does require attitude. And so, Tami, can you help us how we can shift our attitude on the way we look at things?
I can. I'm mainly, I think, here going to talk about the way that we use this word attitude, because I think it's very important. Donna, on your last slide, you talked about not making assumptions. And I think this is so important. I'm so passionate about this, about the word attitude, because attitude, and then the next one we'll talk about motives, are assumptions. So I want you to write this down, commit this to memory. Attitude is the way someone else or you thinks or feels. This is the really important part. We cannot, therefore, truly know what someone's attitude is. Telling someone that they have a bad attitude is like telling someone about his or her own culture. It's not cool. Now, the reference I'm making here, again, I've got Big Bang and dog stories today. I hope you don't get bad feedback that I talk about Big Bang and dogs, but Raj is a character on Big Bang Theory. He's from India, and there is a particular scene where Sheldon starts telling Raj about what things are like in India. And Raj says, "Do not tell me about my own culture." And I'm like, that is what it feels like when someone says we have a bad attitude. They can't know. No matter how much somebody talks or that behaves, no matter what they do, we never truly know everything they think and feel ever, ever, ever. It may seem, and we may want to, look, I say it too, don't get me wrong. I say, oh my gosh, they have such a bad attitude. But then I stop and I remember that's not, I shouldn't say that, because then it just puts me in this position of knowing what they think and what they feel. Now, what I can say is, man, they say things that are so negative, or I can say things about behavior, but saying words about attitude sets me up for failure. I hope that made sense. And it goes along with motive. So let's talk for a minute about motive. So here's my dog. And I learned this so he's training to be a therapy dog. I'll be taking him to nursing homes and assisted livings to help those people. And so we're walking one day and he's pulling me. And I'm angry that he's pulling me. Well, later in that walk, a car now he was small, he was only a few months old. Later in that walk, a car came by and it scared him and he pulled me. I was not angry. As I think about things all the time, like, why did I think that? Why did I respond that way? And here's the deal. In my mind, even though it wasn't at a conscious level, the first time he was pulling me, I believe his motives were he was just being a bad dog. He didn't care. I mean, he's a dog, right? But truly, that's what he's misbehaving. He's all this stuff. But when the car came by and scared him, then I believed his motive was he was afraid. And my whole response changed about the same behavior. So this is, and I didn't put this on the slide, I probably should have, because it's pretty profound. Are you ready? It is not people's behaviors that get on our nerves. It's the motives we assign to their behaviors. So if someone is being nasty to us and we think they're doing it on purpose to hurt us, then we don't like it. But if, let's say, that person is in an emotional turmoil in the moment, and we know they've just lost someone or they've had a death, we give them grace because it's about the motive. So I believe attitude and motive, if we can stop assigning those to people and making assumptions, it will change the way we process that behavior, and it will allow us to address it more than we could have when we assigned a motive or we commented on their attitude. You with me?
Yes. And I think that kind of takes us into really a wonderful segue about the empowerment component of MSPs. And when you just described for us to really kind of do a mental exercise about someone's behavior and maybe think about it in a different way, the reaction that we have will also change or may also change. And it's really about compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And Tami, this is the difficult part, right? As human beings, we all want to be compassionate towards our fellow man. I believe that there is that ability in all of us. But when we feel so beat down, how do we get that in our mind to kind of pause and think, okay, what might they be going through?
Practice, 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 practice. And it's not that we don't let people treat us poorly. And look, I get it. Some people out there may be total jerks to the core. But if we just go into every situation believing that of everyone at the beginning, we become very unhappy and cynical. So it takes practice, and it also takes learning to address situations and having a little bit of success. So we realize that we can make a difference. You know,
so
we don't have to let people treat us poorly. Is
the power then more in our own brains and how we are perceiving things as opposed to giving that external source that power?
It is, but it's also about the skill to learn how to address it. I think it's those two things together. And we're all going to have emotional reactions where we hate somebody in the moment. We think bad things and we may even see bad things, but then it takes allowing the adrenaline to go away and then some time to become what's called a master thinker, where you really do look at problems differently the more and more that you grow.
And I think what you see on the screen here are kind of examples to help us get into that mode of demonstrating compassion or helping us look at things in a different way, just with more gentleness to ourselves, but not putting the emotional, not accepting that emotional baggage that someone's putting on us. So practice active listening. What is this person really saying with the words that they're using and the body language that they're demonstrating, and to validate their experiences. Sometimes people just need to feel like they're being heard. Oh yes, I can tell this is really upsetting you, that experience has really disturbed you. And then collectively working towards, well, how can we solve this? You know, this has been what you shared. I shared what my experience was, but come on, we're very creative people. We're very intelligent people. Let's try to figure out a middle road here. Now, again, I know for some people in the audience, they might think, gosh, Donna, this sounds so good, but I feel like I've tried these things. But again, Tami and I are just asking you to think big, right? Just think of it in a different way and feel the power inside as we're sharing these things with you. Not only by practicing emotional intelligence skills through your compassion and good listening skills, but really demonstrate that you care by hearing another person's concerns. Really, what is it that they're trying to say? Sometimes their word use isn't exactly what they mean, and they might say it in an abrupt way, but really trying to hear what it is they're trying to say. By better understanding them as human beings, you know, their joys, their points of pride, and then meeting with them on a regular basis to the best of your ability. You know, you have to approach these things, your strategies, more slowly too. You can't just jump in and go, okay, from now on, I'm going to have one conversation a day with that person. You know, ease into it. Making sure that we communicate. We want to be that role model. We want to be fair in how we're treating others, right? We want to try to remove any barriers that are creating a problem for people to the best of our ability, and then coach to improve the behaviors of individuals. When you see them doing something well, you see that they're really trying to invest in trying to change, acknowledge that work, and then foster how important that teamwork is when we're working together towards a common goal, and really asking for help. And again, tattling on myself, that's been one of my other weaknesses. Yes, having people like me early on in my career was a really important thing, but even as I've evolved professionally, it's very difficult for me to ask for help. But how do they know if you need some assistance if you don't ask them? And the worst that they can say is no. So and no might be that they really have legitimate reasons why they can't ask for help, or why they can't help you. I mean, any insight into those points, Tami?
No, I really love that you put in there, people, the last thing you just said, people don't know if you don't ask for help. People don't know sometimes about any of the things that are going on if you don't speak up and communicate well. That's what it's thinking and communicating. So I love that piece.
And MSPs, we usually, many of us are type A's, and when we have an assignment, we just plow through and do whatever has to be done to get the job done. And golly, that's what makes us so good at what we do. But think about if you had a buddy you could ask, or hey, another team member that could say, hey, I'm really running behind on this particular project. Would you have any time, a half an hour you could carve out to help me? And sometimes that's even a bonding experience, knowing that you start off small with your request and where it can take you. The next couple of reminders are really just that, just little tips for us, giving up fixing others. Really, the only thing we can control is ourself and our behaviors and our reaction to situations. Building alliances, having those critical conversations, confronting in a positive way something that you're trying to better understand or to qualify or to redirect. Having that conversation, because it's not going to fix itself. Avoid that energy sucker whenever possible. We know those behaviors, those people who have those behaviors. One of the things that will really follow you is your reputation, no matter where you go. Maintaining your professionalism, even in very emotionally charged or difficult circumstances, will work to your benefit. Making sure that we really understand, and Tami, that's really one of my main takeaways of what you said. You said very, very pointed, offered very, very pointed advice, but for me, it's we're responsible for our behaviors. So making sure we understand what our triggers are, why we're behaving in a way that in a situation the way that we did, and then trying to better understand through compassion and better understanding the behavior of others.
Oh, that is so good, Donna.
And I know you love words, so help us with this.
I do love words, and I hope everybody knows this is very fast. So we're trying to just do such a great overview. I was never, if you've heard me speak before, my story is being in a mental hospital for severe anxiety, depression, and panic. And part of my problem was I never knew how to deal with difficult situations. I would just shut down. I would go from silent to violent. I would spew verbal vomit all over people, or I would shut down. So words are very important to me. So I just want to run through a few ideas with words and then talk about emotions and kind of wrap up my part. Choosing your words is super important. If you're not scripting and writing out words, then you're missing out. You may have heard a couple of these before, but using the and versus the but. So if you say something to someone, you've done a great job on this project with me today, but I want to talk about gossip, then they only hear that part. I versus you. When you're writing out conversations, if you start sentences with I noticed this, I heard this, I wondered about that, versus you did this, you said that, it starts off better. Questions versus statements. People will respond to you. People like to be asked questions. They like to know that you care about their input. So if you can phrase things as questions versus statements, it will get you further. A book that I love, and I'm happy to send like links to that, is a book that I've been using for years called Power Phrases. And it basically helps you have words that you commit to memory, and you'll change them around as you learn, so that when you're in a hot situation, you know what to do. So a power phrase is a short, specific, focused expression. It says what you mean. It means what you say without being mean when you say it. The author of this book is Meryl Runyon. I think I'm going to interview her on my podcast in a week or two. She's an amazing woman. Let me throw a few examples up here. I was challenged. Donna has heard this story before, but the short story is I was challenged at a women's conference with my co-trainer in front of the whole group, and I mean in a very negative way. And I remembered this phrase that I had read in that book. And I said, so she said something ugly to me or asked me a question. And I said, well, why would you ask me something like that? It came from learning power phrases. So are you asking me just very poignant phrases? The next slide, she then put me down in front of the group. And I'm not sure if the correct one is circled here, Donna. I think my circle got moved. Should have been on the next one down. So she said something ugly to me again in front of 120 women. And I said, I didn't say the exact thing, but I said, I want to hear what you have to say, but not the pot shots. See, it's short, it's focused. But I realize it's not easy because we are all dealing with emotions, and sometimes that's anger in the heat of the situation. So let's talk about that for a minute. It's hard to sometimes speak up in the moment because you're being flooded with adrenaline. So how do we deal with anger and emotions? Here's my wrap up for this whole thing. I think if you can commit these 5 steps to memory, you are going to be good. The first thing, because you're filled with adrenaline when some behavior occurs, I would teach you how to breathe if you were in front of me, but you're not. So, take in those deep breaths. And by tense and relax, what I mean is adrenaline is designing your muscles to move, or it's helping your muscles to move, and you won't feel better until you burn it off. So squeeze your muscles and relax them, squeeze them, relax them, so that you're able to think again. So do that first, deal with the physical symptoms. Number 2, in the heat of the moment, find a power phrase. Maybe it's, I need time to process this before I can respond. You have every right to say that. If you're in the middle of a difficult situation, you don't need to be responding right away if you're not sure what your thoughts are about it yet. So use a power phrase. Number 3, go to that thought. Are you thinking, I hate this person. This person only cares about themselves. They think they're the king of the world. Remember, these are assumptions about people's thoughts and attitudes. Go ahead and identify your thought. Try to tweak it into a behavior-based thought. Number 4, go ahead and identify your emotion. Sometimes we use the word livid all the time, or we use the word infuriated all the time, or we use these big emotional words when really maybe we're frustrated. Maybe we're angry, maybe we're livid. So identify your emotion. And then number 5 is to problem solve. That's a whole nother session, right, Donna?
That's right.
Problem solving means identifying that problem, figuring out what you're going to do about it, trying something, and evaluating. And I'm happy to send that tool out, Callie, to you or Donna. I have one that y'all are welcome to use. I write down my problem solving every time I have a new situation. So that's kind of how I wrap up the way I think you can kind of do better with these toxic type behaviors.
And that step-by-step also offers friendly reminders for us as we're closing out this particular session and opening up the audience floor for questions and answers. Now, again, you have an MSP and you have a psychologist here. So use this opportunity to share to your comfort level. But as friendly reminders, seek out positive people. Try not to overanalyze the situation. Redirect accordingly. Establish boundaries through communication. Practice self-care skills by participating in sessions just like this. Things that make you feel valuable about what you're doing from day to day, and passing that along to your coworkers, right? Everybody wants to feel like they're contributing to the bigger picture. And then when all else fails, because sometimes we have to work. We have to work in that particular work environment because we have bills to pay. So do the best that you can to follow these techniques, and sometimes just being kind to people, even when they're not they don't practice kindness back. But I always say, it's our job as human beings to just be as kind as you possibly can in situations. It doesn't mean you're a doormat. It just means let's practice compassion and kindness towards one another. Tami offered this power thought.
I did, yeah, because I tend to want everything pre-done. I want things to be ready and done, and what we've given you are the ingredients. I hate when I go to the kitchen looking for food and all I find are ingredients. I hate when I look for a solution to a problem and I am given steps. So I want to change that about myself, and I hope that you'll do the same. We got to have the pieces, we got to have the parts, and then we put them together and we get this yummy meal, this yummy communication way that we now proceed.
Yes. And really, sometimes, no matter how nice, no matter how compassionate we are, it just sometimes isn't going to be good enough for some people. And those are the people, to the best of our ability, we just have to let go. We've tried everything that we can, and just letting them go. And there's a peace and a power knowing when it's time to move on. And being at peace about that, and having confidence that, hey, heck, you tried. That was a good way of practicing all of these strategies that we've offered. So as Callie tees up any questions that came from our listeners, I'm Callie, I'm going to toss this to you. If you could please share with us the next symplr engagement session.
Yes, no problem. Thank you so much for that. Our next symplr Engage conference is happening in Denver in September. Registration is currently open, and it is free for any symplr customer or prospect to attend. If you are looking to make the jump to symplr, you can come and head on out. Donna and her team will actually be out there on site. We are giving away 9 NAM CEU credit hours. You can talk with top product and management members of symplr, and also have the opportunity to network and participate in roundtables as well. If you can't make it out in September to Denver, we also have one more stop in Nashville in December. You can go to Engage 2019 for that information. Also of note, we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar along with the slide deck within the next 3 or so business days. You will get that in an email along with the NAM CEU certificate for those who attended live today. Our next session with Donna is pair enrollment and reimbursements, happening on Thursday, July 11th. I know that we are bumping up along the 1 o'clock deadline for time ending for this meeting, but we did have a ton of questions come in. Donna and Tami, I have 2 really important ones that I would like to get answered right off the bat, and then we can decide if we'd like to continue on or not. But the first one is, I spoke up about a director. Leadership knows her personality and attitude and just looked the other way. Of course, now how can I trust leadership when something else comes up? This makes me want to quit my job, but of course I love my actual job. What can you suggest? At this point, I just avoid her, but when we are in the same room, I try to smile and nod.
Well, you practiced some of those techniques that we gave you, so good for you from a psychology standpoint. Tami, can you help us?
Yeah, I think because I'm hearing a lot of things in there. And so when I talk about problem solving, and I would love to send out that problem solving tool, what I encourage you to do is to sit down and write down, because there are multiple problems in that situation, right? Not just one. And so if it were me, then I would write those out and pick one and start one at a time, going through, what is the issue? What is the problem? What might be causing it? And that's a really important part of the problem solving tool and you can make a list of all the things that might be causing it until you feel like you've narrowed in onto something. And then we make a list of all the choices. And I recommend people do this as a brainstorm with one or two positive people. Remember, Donna said seek out positive people who are not involved in the situation. And then you can go through and pick one at a time some of the options. And I'm happy to send that and even communicate with anybody who wants a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, Tami, if you would be so kind to send that in to either Callie or myself, we'll make sure, asking Callie if you could send that along with the PowerPoint.
Yep,
Yes,
I've got it down right now because I think that is so important. Yes.
All right, fantastic. All right, another one that came up was, Tami, could you again say how we assign motivation to bad behavior? This person said it was perfectly expressed and she wants to make sure she writes it down right.
Yes, and if you meant, let me say the one phrase, I'm thinking this is what you meant because I said write it down. It's not people's behaviors that get on our nerves. It's the motives we assign to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we might have all heard, I can't remember who told the story, but there was mom with a bunch of kids on a bus or train and they were misbehaving and everybody was all upset. Oh, these kids are terrible. Well, then they found out that the mother died. And then they were all like, oh, those poor kids. And so it wasn't the behavior that was getting on the nerves. It was the fact that they thought the kids were bad kids and the dad wasn't controlling them. But once they assigned or learned another motive, oh, well, then it didn't get on their nerves anymore. I think that's what you were asking. If not, please let me know.
Right, and for the questions that we do not get to today, I will be sending the questions to both of our guest speakers. They will have your contact information to be able to reach out to you. We did have quite a few questions come in and we do still have a predominant amount of our audience still with us. So if y'all are still willing to do maybe one or two more questions, we can do a couple more questions for the audience.
I'm cool. Yeah, good.
All right, another one that came in, any tips for leadership subversion, i.e. undermining authority, especially when a staff member tries to rally their colleagues?
Wow.
Oh, Donna, I thought you, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking on that. I'm just thinking of the circumstances, applying it to some things that perhaps I experienced. It's almost like sabotaging, right? Undermining leadership. So there's another person who's trying to rally their cause. I don't
say
understand.
that again.
Yeah.
Callie, would you mind reading that again?
Yeah, no problem.
I'm so sorry. I know we're trying to hurry, but.
Yeah. Any tips for leadership subversion, i.e. undermining authority, especially when a staff member tries to rally their colleagues?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a staff member is trying to usurp the
authority. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So those are what I would suggest is a scripted out conversation. And the scripted out conversation should be, because when you, again, that's kind of a big thing, and you might be tempted to want to talk to the person and tell them 7 things that they did in the past 2 months, and then they feel verbally vomited upon. And so what I do in that situation is pick the most current situation. I script out the conversation, which I will put in the same tool with the problem solving. And when you script out a conversation, you have several options. You present the facts, you talk about an impact, you talk about the new behavior that we want. And oftentimes we don't word it in a way that sets the person up for success because we ask them for a different attitude, which you can't measure. So I recommend starting fresh with some current behaviors, scripting out a conversation. I'm also going to recommend the power phrases in the moment and speaking up when it happens, but in a confident, not demeaning way to that person, because you don't want to change it to a problem that's different but could be even worse. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think it just validates again, whoever submitted that question, it validates again the top 6 items, because that definitely is sabotaging leadership.
Yeah, and it can feel like there's no solution, but if I have gotten across anything, I want everybody to just feel empowered, you know? It may take some time, it may take some learning, it may take some pain, but we really can address difficult situations, and we can do it successfully, depending on what your definition of success is. But I believe you can. I really do.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, to be respectful to everyone's afternoon, I believe we are going to conclude the webinar right about now. Again, I will be sending these questions that we did not get to over to Tami and Donna, concluding this webinar, so they will have your contact information to reach out to you. You will be getting an email that does have the recording of this webinar for you to be able to show and share with your coworkers, and a downloadable version of the slides that will have the links as well for you to look up the books that have been mentioned and techniques. On behalf of symplr, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And Donna and Tami, do y'all have some parting words for our audience?
Callie, just point of clarification for our listeners. I'm not sure I heard, but also the tools that Tami is going to send, that will be part of the downloads?
Yes, that will be included in the email that has all of that information, yes.
Perfect. No, thank you so much, Tami. I enjoyed, even though it was done remotely, I enjoyed teaching with you again.
I enjoyed it as well. I'm so honored that you asked. Thank you all. I'm excited about you going forward and using some of the techniques. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.